The cheap version of this story would be easy to sell. Milla Jovovich, known from The Fifth Element and Resident Evil, is connected to an open-source AI memory project called MemPalace. That sounds like perfect tech clickbait. But it is not the interesting version. The better version starts with a problem that almost everyone runs into once they use AI agents for real work. The work is still there, but the context is gone. The files are there. The chat logs are there. Decisions were made. Bugs were investigated. Notes were written. But when the agent cannot find those traces again, they are practically lost. Not because the model suddenly became stupid, because the relevant history is no longer on its desk. That is why MemPalace is interesting. Not as a magical new brain for artificial intelligence, and not as a celebrity side project to laugh at or worship. It is interesting as an answer to a serious infrastructure question. If AI agents are supposed to do real work over days, projects and teams, where does their working history live? The public source trail frames Milla Jovovich as an architect and creator voice for MemPalace. The project pages also name Ben Sigman as the engineer. That distinction matters. The claim here is not that Milla wrote every line of code herself. The better, more accurate story is collaborative. A creative power user hits a real agent problem. A technical partner turns the idea into working software, and then an open-source community forces the project to become more precise. That is a modern tool culture story. To understand it, we have to demystify the word memory. When people in AI say memory, they usually do not mean that the model itself learns a personal memory the way a human does. And they usually do not mean that the model weights are changed. The active context window is more like a work desk. Everything on that desk can be used right now. Your prompt, the visible files, the current instructions, maybe some search results, maybe part of the previous conversation. But the desk is limited. When a project gets long, when a conversation gets compacted, when an agent runs across many tasks, things fall off the desk. Sometimes they are summarized, sometimes they are omitted, and often the missing parts are exactly the parts that mattered. Why one approach was rejected, which repair already failed, what constraint the team agreed on yesterday. Memory, in this more practical sense, is the archive beside the desk. Retrieval augmented generation is the moment the system searches that archive and brings a relevant piece back onto the desk. Context engineering is the discipline of deciding which pieces should be brought back and which pieces should stay out. Fine-tuning is something else again. That changes model behavior through training. MemPalace is not that category. MemPalace belongs in the category local archive, search layer, and tool accessible side channel for agent work. That sounds less magical. For real agent workflows, it may be more important. Because a larger context window alone does not solve the problem. If you dump more and more material onto the same desk, the desk gets bigger, but not automatically more organized. You still need a way to find old traces. And ideally, you do not only want summaries, you want the original notes, chats, files, decisions, and mistakes to remain recoverable. This is where the Milla Jovovich angle becomes more than a headline. In the public project framing, the starting point is not an abstract benchmark. It is a practical frustration. Humans put things somewhere, but the AI system does not reliably find them later. The metaphor that comes out of that is the memory palace, not just a pile of files, a place, a structure with wings, rooms, closets and drawers. An attempt to turn scattered working traces into something that can be searched and navigated. That is the product impulse. And it is interesting partly because Milla is not entering the story as a typical senior infrastructure engineer. In the project sources, she appears more like an intense AI power user and public project voice, someone who reaches the edge of what the current chat-based workflow can hold and asks a strong product question. How should AI memory be shaped so it does not only store things but helps the agent find them again? Then Ben Sigman enters the picture. He is not a footnote in this story. He is the engineering partner. The project pages and repository trail frame him as the technical force behind the software work. Repository, releases, hooks, MCP integration, security warnings, triage, packaging, and repair. All the unromantic pieces that decide whether a memory system is actually usable. That is why the fair version of the story is not a solo genius narrative. Milla brings the problem, the metaphor, the user pressure, and the public creator voice. Ben brings engineering and shipping, and later the community brings something just as important, pushback. Before that reality check, look at what MemPalace is trying to be. The strong idea is local first memory. Your traces can live locally. It emphasizes verbatim storage, meaning original material is preserved instead of being reduced immediately to tiny summaries. It emphasizes search, so an agent can retrieve relevant pieces later. And it emphasizes integration, so a memory layer can be connected to agent tools without putting everything into the prompt all the time. In one sentence, do not shove the entire past into the context window. Keep an archive beside the agent and retrieve what matters when it matters. To make that concrete, we prepared a small sanitized demo. The demo is not a benchmark. It is not private data. It is not a live production memory database. It is a clean reconstruction of the side channel pattern. The active chat asks, what storage strategy did we decide for this demo? The active context does not know. A bad agent would guess. A better agent searches the side channel. It queries a small markdown corpus. It finds a note called Decision Important, and that note says, use a markdown corpus for the demo. Do not show SQLite in the visual. That is the whole point. The agent is not magically remembering. It is retrieving a source and using it to act consistently. This is the difference between a model that sounds confident and a workflow that can recover evidence. Now, the reality check matters. MemPalace did not arrive as a perfect object. The open source trail includes issues, corrections, and benchmark caveats. That is not a weakness of the story. It is part of why the story is worth telling. Early claims were challenged. The project had to become more careful. Community members looked at the code, at the benchmark language, and at what the numbers actually meant. One important caveat is the benchmark framing. Numbers like 96.6% R at 5 are retrieval recall. They are not the same as end-to-end answer quality. They do not prove that the agent will always answer correctly. They say something narrower, whether relevant items are found in a retrieval setup. That narrower claim can still be valuable. It is just not magic. There is also a difference between raw retrieval and the whole memory palace structure. If raw retrieval reproduces strongly, that does not automatically prove every architectural metaphor is doing the work. It means the project has to be precise about what is measured. That precision is exactly what open source can force. An issue points out a weak claim. A maintainer acknowledges it. A pull request rewrites benchmark language. A history document records corrections. The story becomes less shiny and more useful. For AI infrastructure, that is a good trade. The most interesting projects are often not the ones that never make a messy claim. They are the ones that survive contact with users, critics, and maintainers. And MemPalace is especially interesting because it sits at the crossing point of several trends. Agents are getting more tool access. Chats are turning into long-running work sessions. Developers are using systems like Claude Code and other coding agents across real repositories. And every one of those workflows creates working history that can be lost if the system cannot retrieve it. This is why the phrase AI amnesia is useful, even if it is not a formal technical term. It names the experience. The agent worked with you before, but today it cannot find the reason behind yesterday's decision. The fix is not simply more context. More context helps, but it can also become a bigger pile. The deeper fix is better retrieval, better source preservation, and better context selection. In that sense, MemPalace is not trying to replace the model. It is trying to sit next to it. A sidecar, a side channel, a searchable working archive. That is also why the celebrity angle should be handled carefully. If the thumbnail only says Hollywood star builds AI memory, the story becomes too cheap. If the video pretends that fame is technical proof, it becomes wrong. The better frame is this. Milla Jovovich makes the problem legible to a wider audience. Ben, Sigman, and the engineering work make it concrete. The open source community makes it more honest. Those three roles belong together. Product impulse, engineering, community correction. That triangle is much more interesting than a simple celebrity narrative. It also says something about where AI tooling is going. The next wave of useful agent systems will not only be about larger models. It will be about the boring infrastructure around them: file access, search, permissions, audit trails, memory, recovery, repair, and a clean way to decide what gets put back into context. Memory is not a feeling in the model. It is an operating layer around the work. So the final question is not whether MemPalace is the final answer. It probably is not. No young open-source project should be treated that way. The question is whether it points in the right direction. And I think it does. If AI agents are going to become real collaborators, they need more than a brilliant next token. They need a way to recover their own working history without pretending, guessing, or hallucinating. They need to know when to search. They need sources they can cite back to the user. They need memory that can be inspected, corrected, and backed up. And they need systems that make old decisions visible again when the current context has forgotten them. That is the real story behind Milla Jovovich and MemPalace. Not a Hollywood miracle, not a finished enterprise memory platform. A surprisingly good doorway into one of the most practical questions in AI agents. Where does the work go when it leaves the chat window? And how does the agent find it again?